Some of the dark arts and teaching our business folk here about scrummaging. What would you say is what's the one leadership principle from the Scrum that every business leader should understand?
Well, that's a simple one for me. It's just, I suppose, in a rugby sense, in a Scrum sense, being a cohesive unit.
Yeah,
Uh, I think that's really important. I think, as we found now with the Scrum, even most recently, one part falls and generally the dominoes come down. That's the effect on the other guys and other players. And I find that that's probably falls into teamwork and all the other aspects around that. But being a cohesive unit is probably, I think, a better word, because you have some sort of direction, you've got goals, you're ambitious, you're kind of moving forward. And I suppose you're trying to break through even though there's pressure, fighting through pressure zones, and, as we do in the Scrum, so I think that's probably a good way to kind of put it.
yeah, cohesive unit. And would you say as well? I mean, that's a great answer. Don't go backwards. What would you
Yeah,
say?
I sometimes think, at the Scrum, and I suppose we did this more recently now that the Scrum has changed, don't go backwards, but I suppose rather for me is kind of, if you do you have the ability to go forwards again? Because sometimes when I coach the Scrum, I kind of say, well, connections are really important, in the sense of the shoulders and the hips and the feet. Sometimes a team that you'll find that has got the upper hand and they get momentum, a lot of the time when you do get momentum, and Fitzy and you guys will know this, Liam, moving forward in the Scrum, you have multiple foot movement, then there's movement in the hips and there's movement in the shoulders. So if you can keep together and keep a unit really intact, you have an opportunity to react and come back at that. And your chances of reacting very well is good, because why? They are looser than they ever have been from the start of that Scrum. So it doesn't happen very often, but I would believe, I've had it. You find you through, and then suddenly you hit a brick wall. What's going on now? And then you actually completely separated from your hooker, and it can be kind of a real nasty surprise. So I would say, to say if you don't go back, but I suppose if you do go, find put the things in place to go forward again. I think it will kind of take them by
Yeah,
surprise again.
yeah, absolutely.
Well, and I think it ties into what you were saying earlier, having that vision, making a plan, and doing the work together, right? So everyone's coordinated, everyone buys into that, whether it be the Scrum, life, business, units, that all helps. So
Yeah, and I think, sorry, Fitz, I was going to say that I think the important part around, say, in the kind of leadership or corporate or whatever, in the sense of like the fundamentals are so important. And I suppose the fundamentals, when you talk about Scrum and stuff, and the kind of key areas of the Scrum are so important. I mean, those key areas for me, as maybe in kind of leadership or corporate, in business, should be obviously implemented. But I suppose within that, once that is kind of implemented and the standard is set, what then has to come is really the buy-in mentally, the kind of that emotional stuff. And I mean, what drives that initially, that is going to be the essence and the difference. Like, a lot of the people can just, as I said, in a Scrum, you can bind, you can tell someone how to bind, but at what point does the pressure come too much and you lose your bind? Or what pressure does the pressure come too much and you move your foot? And these things that obviously lead in leadership, I suppose, have the knock-on effects that are quite big. And I mean, how much are you then relying on your second row or your back row to hold you in or secure you, or knowing what you're going through, or understanding how we're on the same page there? So look, I just thought I'd send that in there, but that's similarly to kind of almost forgetting. We want to forget about the fundamentals. Those need to be givens. That's the standard. That is our standard inevitably, because when we get to the 60th or 65th minute, we don't want to be thinking about specifics then. We've just come from a maul. We are 10 tackles down, blowing like a tractor, and we want to now 5 points down. We've got one Scrum to turn this around. What do we do at that moment? We want to really buy the motion.
yeah, no, it's good.